5 regions on Earth sit on the precipice of nuclear conflict, with millions of lives hanging in the balance. While most of us go about our daily routines, geopolitical tensions in these hotspots escalate toward potential disaster. In this documentary, we'll map the 5 most dangerous nuclear flashpoints that experts believe could trigger the unthinkable. Some are familiar flashpoints that have simmered for decades, while others represent emerging threats that may surprise viewers. From territorial disputes in Asia to long-standing regional rivalries, these conflicts represent potential pathways to nuclear confrontation. Join us as we examine the complex forces driving these high-stakes standoffs and their global implications. North Korea's nuclear journey. North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons began in the shadow of the Korean War. In the 1950s, with the devastating conflict still fresh in the collective memory of the nation, Kim Il-sung established a research complex at Yongbyon. This facility, initially focused on peaceful nuclear energy, would become the cornerstone of the country's weapons program in the decades to follow. Soviet assistance provided the foundation, with Moscow helping construct a small research reactor that went critical in 1965. What started as a modest program under Soviet guidance evolved like a slow-burning fuse, first with plutonium extraction capabilities in the 1970s, then accelerating with the construction of a larger reactor capable of producing weapons-grade material in the 1980s. This gradual buildup reflected North Korea's precarious geopolitical position, sandwiched between major powers while facing a South Korea backed by American military might. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a critical turning point. Suddenly stripped of its primary benefactor, North Korea faced economic catastrophe and heightened vulnerability. Nuclear weapons transformed from a military asset into an essential guarantee of regime survival. This existential calculus was evident when North Korea threatened to withdraw from the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, NPT. In 1993, after the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, demanded special inspections upon detecting discrepancies in plutonium production. The 1994 agreed framework temporarily froze the program in exchange for energy assistance. But this arrangement collapsed in 2002 when evidence emerged of a clandestine uranium enrichment program. By January 2003, North Korea had formally withdrawn from the NPT, the only nation ever to do so after signing the treaty, demonstrating the regime's willingness to operate outside international norms when core interests were at stake. North Korea crossed the nuclear threshold on October 9, 2006, with its first nuclear test yielding less than 1 kiloton. 5 more tests followed, with explosive yields growing dramatically to an estimated 100 to 250 kilotons by 2017, many times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This progression demonstrated a technical mastery that consistently outpaced Western intelligence assessments. When Kim Jong-un assumed power following his father's death in 2011, he dramatically accelerated the nuclear program. Under his leadership, North Korea conducted 4 of its 6 nuclear tests and over 100 missile tests, more than his father and grandfather combined. This acceleration persisted despite international sanctions targeting North Korea's primary revenue sources, including coal, textiles, seafood, and overseas workers, costing the regime an estimated $2 to $3 billion annually in export revenue. The military expenses consume an estimated 15 to 25% of North Korea's GDP, among the highest rates globally, while the broader economy stagnates and food shortages persist. This prioritization reflects a fundamental strategic shift from conventional deterrence to nuclear capabilities. For decades, North Korea relied on its massive artillery force capable of striking Seoul within minutes as its primary deterrent. However, the growing technological and economic disparity with South Korea rendered this conventional approach increasingly less credible. The regime's legitimacy hinges on a narrative of perpetual threat, particularly from the United States. State propaganda constantly reminds citizens of American bombing during the Korean War, which destroyed nearly all major North Korean cities and killed an estimated 20% of the population. As one North Korean official bluntly explained their nuclear rationale, the Americans destroyed Iraq because it didn't have nuclear weapons. We will not make the same mistake. North Korea's missile program has evolved from basic Scud derivatives to sophisticated ICBMs. The Hwasong-15, tested in 2017, demonstrated a theoretical range exceeding 13,000 kilometers, sufficient to reach anywhere in the continental United States. Engineers have also mastered crucial miniaturization technologies for mounting nuclear warheads on these delivery systems, an achievement that many experts had predicted would take decades. Rather than focusing solely on strategic deterrence, the regime has developed a diverse nuclear arsenal ranging from tactical battlefield weapons to submarine-launched ballistic missiles designed for second strike capability. This diversity indicates an intention to integrate nuclear weapons into military planning at multiple levels. The program places North Korea in violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and the Joint Declaration on the Denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula signed with South Korea in 1992. What makes North Korea's nuclear doctrine particularly dangerous is its explicit threat of preemptive strikes. Its 2013 law outlines broad conditions for nuclear use, including responding to conventional attacks if perceived as threatening regime survival. This low threshold, combined with the regime's isolation, creates unique dangers in crisis scenarios. Beyond security, the nuclear program serves multiple objectives. Domestically, it provides legitimacy to the Kim dynasty as guardians of national sovereignty. Internationally, it has transformed an impoverished state into one commanding global attention. When Kim Jong-un threatened fire and fury in 2017, he received direct engagement from the U.S. president, recognition unattainable without nuclear leverage. The program also functions as an economic bargaining chip in a country with few alternatives. The pattern of provocation followed by offers to negotiate in exchange for sanctions relief has become a recognizable North Korean strategy, effectively using its weapons program as leverage to extract concessions from the international community. Patterns of provocation and brinkmanship. This extortion mechanism isn't merely opportunistic. It's a sophisticated strategy refined over decades. When we map North Korea's most aggressive actions against domestic pressures and international events, a disturbing pattern emerges that challenges conventional nuclear deterrence theory. The regime has perfected what analysts call the provocation cycle, a calculated sequence of escalation and de-escalation that follows a predictable rhythm. First, North Korea creates a crisis through missile tests or nuclear detonations. Then, it offers negotiations while demanding concessions. Once benefits are secured, the cycle begins anew with fresh provocations. March 2017 exemplifies this strategic choreography. Within a single month, North Korea launched 4 extended-range Scud missiles into the Sea of Japan, tested the high-thrust engine for its Hwasong-12 intermediate-range ballistic missile, and conducted additional missile tests, while simultaneously pursuing diplomatic outreach through unofficial channels. This calculated pressure resembles a deadly chess match, where each provocative move advances multiple objectives simultaneously, leaving adversaries uncertain which threat to counter first. The regime times these provocations with remarkable precision to exploit specific political circumstances. In 2012, as President Obama began his second term and new leadership emerged in China and South Korea, North Korea conducted a satellite launch and nuclear test within months. Major provocations frequently align with South Korean elections, U.S. military exercises, or leadership transitions across the region. The technological evolution of these threats tells its own story. The first nuclear test in 2006 yielded less than a kiloton, so small that analysts questioned its success. By 2017, the regime was testing devices with estimated yields between 100 to 250 kilotons, comparable to modern strategic warheads. In August 2017, North Korea launched a Hwasong-12 missile directly over Hokkaido, Japan, traveling approximately 2,700 kilometers before splashing into the Pacific. Japan's emergency alert system forced citizens into shelters, demonstrating the psychological impact these actions have even without physical damage. That same month, Kim Jong-un threatened to create an enveloping fire around Guam using Hwasong-12 missiles. Military officials announced they were carefully examining a plan to target the areas surrounding Andersen Air Force Base. This specific threat against U.S. territory represented a calculated escalation designed to force Washington's attention. The tactical precision becomes evident when examining provocations in relation to diplomatic engagement. In September 2005, North Korea committed to abandoning its nuclear program during six-party talks, then conducted its first nuclear test just 1 year later. In February 2012, the Leap Day Agreement secured North Korea's commitment to a moratorium on nuclear and missile tests in exchange for food aid. Within weeks, it announced a satellite launch that nullified the agreement. Foreign policy experts termed this approach coercive bargaining, using provocations to create leverage, then converting that leverage into tangible benefits like sanctions relief or economic assistance. The strategy exploits what game theorists call the risk of inadvertent escalation. By creating crises that could potentially spiral out of control, North Korea forces other powers to seek de-escalation through concessions. Kim Jong-un clearly articulated this thinking in 2018, stating that North Korea's nuclear forces constituted a powerful deterrent that prevents the U.S. from starting an adventurous war. However, unlike traditional deterrence focused on preventing attack, North Korea's approach uses the threat of conflict to extract benefits under conditions short of war. A dangerous evolution in this strategy has been the development of tactical nuclear weapons since 2019. During a January 2021 Party Congress, Kim announced plans to develop tactical nuclear weapons and miniaturized warheads. North Korea subsequently began testing various short-range systems potentially capable of delivering nuclear payloads, including the KN-23 and the KN-25 super-large multiple rocket launcher. These tactical nuclear weapons, designed for battlefield use against troop concentrations or command centers, significantly lower the threshold for nuclear use by creating scenarios where limited nuclear strikes might be considered in conventional conflicts. A frightening prospect, given the Korean Peninsula's volatility. This brinkmanship creates conditions where miscalculation becomes increasingly probable. In November 2017, a North Korean soldier defected across the DMZ under fire. Had those bullets caused casualties in South Korean territory, the incident could have triggered a military response during an already tense period following North Korea's sixth nuclear test. The regime's closed nature compounds these risks by limiting insight into internal deliberations, creating what strategists call the fog of crisis, conditions where misinterpretation becomes dangerously likely. Several specific scenarios could trigger actual nuclear weapon use. First, a use it or lose it situation where North Korea believes a preemptive strike against its facilities is imminent. Second, internal regime instability that might prompt nuclear use as a desperate measure. Third, conventional conflict escalation. With Seoul just 35 miles from the DMZ and over 25 million people within artillery range, even limited exchanges could rapidly intensify. The international community's response pattern, sanctions following provocations, partial relief during diplomatic engagement, has inadvertently reinforced this cycle by creating a predictable framework that North Korea manipulates to its advantage. Equally concerning is how nuclear brinkmanship has normalized over time. When North Korea first tested a nuclear device in 2006, it triggered international alarm and unified condemnation. By 2017, after the sixth test, the global response had become almost routine, demonstrating how even nuclear provocations lose their shock value through repetition. Regional destabilization effects. As North Korea's nuclear tests became commonplace, something far more concerning was happening beneath the surface of regional politics. The strategic calculations of every major power in Northeast Asia were quietly shifting, creating a dangerous new dynamic where traditional security arrangements no longer seem adequate against an unpredictable nuclear neighbor. For decades, South Korea and Japan operated under a simple security equation. Facing conventional threats from North Korea and others, they relied on America's extended deterrence, including its nuclear umbrella, while maintaining their own strictly non-nuclear military postures. This arrangement formed the cornerstone of Northeast Asian security architecture since the Korean War. The American nuclear umbrella allowed these countries to focus on economic development rather than military buildups, contributing to regional stability. But the equation has fundamentally changed. As Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal grows more sophisticated with each test, both Seoul and Tokyo have begun questioning whether America's security guarantees remain sufficient. The question strikes at existential fears. When a North Korean missile can reach Tokyo or Seoul in minutes, the credibility of U.S. promises to retaliate becomes the difference between survival and annihilation. This growing uncertainty has triggered a cascading military transformation across the region, with South Korea leading the shift. Seoul has developed the kill chain system, a network of sensors, intelligence platforms, and precision-guided munitions designed to detect and preemptively neutralize North Korean nuclear threats. This marks a fundamental pivot from defensive to offensive doctrine, exemplified by Hyun-Masiri's ballistic missiles capable of striking anywhere in North Korea within minutes, and F-35A stealth fighters equipped to penetrate North Korean airspace undetected. Public sentiment in South Korea has shifted dramatically. Recent polls show over 70% of South Koreans now support indigenous nuclear armament. In 2023, then-President Yoon Suk-yeol publicly acknowledged that South Korea would consider developing nuclear weapons if North Korean threats intensified further, a statement unimaginable a decade ago. Japan's security evolution has followed a parallel trajectory despite starting from different constitutional constraints. Article 9 of Japan's 1947 Constitution limited its military to purely defensive capabilities, but North Korea's provocations have accelerated Japan's departure from these post-war restrictions. The Japanese self-defense forces have acquired Aegis-equipped destroyers and Patriot missile defense batteries while reinterpreting constitutional limits to permit collective self-defense, allowing Japanese forces to support allies under attack. In 2022, Japan announced plans to double defense spending to 2% of GDP by 2027, the most significant military expansion since World War II, including development of counterstrike capabilities that would allow Japan to hit enemy bases preemptively. The security situation has deteriorated to the point where Japan, the only nation to have experienced nuclear attacks, has seen serious political discussion about nuclear options, with former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe suggesting Japan should consider hosting U.S. nuclear weapons similar to NATO arrangements. This regional arms race has spread like ripples in a pond. Taiwan has extended the range of its indigenous missiles. Australia has pursued nuclear-powered submarines through the AUKUS partnership. Traditional rivalries have given way to new security alignments, with South Korea and Japan historically divided by colonial-era grievances, strengthening military cooperation through trilateral anti-submarine warfare exercises with the United States in 2022. America's military posture has transformed in response, deploying THAAD missile defense systems in South Korea and increasing the rotation of strategic assets like nuclear-capable bombers through the region. These deployments have created second-order effects, with China viewing systems like THAAD as threatening its own nuclear deterrent. Beijing has responded with increased military activities and economic pressure on South Korea, demonstrating how North Korea's nuclear program has catalyzed broader strategic competition. The region now faces dangerously compressed decision timelines, with multiple nuclear powers operating in close proximity. A missile defense test could be misinterpreted as offensive preparation, while military exercises might be seen as attack preludes. The absence of crisis communication mechanisms between rivals heightens the risk that miscalculation could spiral into conflict. North Korea's nuclear development has weakened nonproliferation norms, creating concerning incentives for other threatened states. Countries observe how North Korea's nuclear status has forced international accommodation despite sanctions, potentially encouraging reconsideration of non-nuclear positions if confidence in American extended deterrence continues to erode. Strategic impacts extend beyond Northeast Asia. Australia now explicitly accounts for North Korean capabilities in defense planning. ASEAN nations have strengthened anti-proliferation positions while simultaneously increasing defense spending. India and Pakistan study how North Korea manages its nuclear status for potential lessons in their own security contexts. Perhaps most profound is the gradual normalization of North Korea as a nuclear state. What was once unthinkable has become accepted reality, evident in how diplomatic language has shifted from denuclearization to arms control or risk reduction. This tacit acknowledgement signals to potential proliferators that nuclear acquisition, while costly, can ultimately succeed despite international opposition. A dangerous lesson that threatens decades of non-proliferation efforts and regional stability. Global proliferation concerns. While the world reluctantly adjusts to a nuclear North Korea, a more insidious threat emerges. The blueprint for nuclear defiance it provides to other ambitious states. North Korea didn't just build bombs. It created a playbook for breaking the rules and getting away with it. This strategic blueprint has profound implications for global security. Iran, despite facing similar international pressure, has watched North Korea's nuclear journey with keen interest. Evidence suggests that Iranian officials have been present at North Korean nuclear and missile tests, absorbing technical lessons while studying diplomatic tactics. The countries maintain a transactional relationship where missile technology flows to Iran while hard currency flows back to Pyongyang. North Korea's proliferation activities extend beyond Iran. In September 2007, Israeli warplanes destroyed a facility at Al-Kabar in eastern Syria. International Atomic Energy Agency investigations confirmed it was a nearly operational nuclear reactor built with North Korean assistance. The reactor's design resembled North Korea's Yongbyon facility, with satellite imagery identifying North Korean personnel at the site, all while Syria remained a nuclear non-proliferation treaty signatory. Similarly, throughout the 2000s, intelligence agencies detected cooperation between Myanmar's military junta and North Korea, with defectors reporting North Korean technicians working on underground facilities and suspicious shipments moving between countries. What makes these proliferation activities particularly dangerous is North Korea's sophisticated evasion of international controls. The country operates extensive networks of front companies in China, Singapore, and Malaysia. These entities employ false documentation, shell companies, and indirect shipping routes to acquire dual-use technologies with both industrial and weapons applications. A 2017 UN report identified 13 North Korean banking representatives still operating internationally despite explicit sanctions prohibiting such presence. The maritime smuggling operations reveal the depth of this circumvention. In the dark waters of the East China Sea, North Korean vessels silently approach foreign tankers, extinguishing identification lights. Within hours, millions of dollars worth of coal transfers from one ship to another, while restricted petroleum products flow in the opposite direction. The ships then disperse, often changing names and registration flags before their next rendezvous. A single such midnight transaction can generate critical funding for nuclear development while importing the very materials sanctions aim to restrict. The normalization of North Korea as a nuclear state represents perhaps the most profound regional change. This tacit acknowledgement, evident in how diplomatic language has shifted from denuclearization to arms control, signals to potential proliferators that nuclear acquisition can succeed despite opposition. This diplomatic retreat represents more than semantic surrender. It weakens a critical global safeguard. Countries like Iran now recalculate their nuclear ambitions, observing how an impoverished nation forced global powers to accommodate its nuclear reality. This erosion diminishes non-proliferation commitments globally. When threatened states observe how nuclear weapons have essentially guaranteed North Korea's regime survival despite isolation, the security calculus changes fundamentally. Saudi Arabia has explicitly stated its nuclear intentions regarding Iran, With Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman telling CBS News in 2018, Saudi Arabia does not want to acquire any nuclear bomb, but without a doubt, if Iran developed a nuclear bomb, we will follow suit as soon as possible. The South Korean response illustrates this shifting landscape. As a model non-nuclear state with advanced technical capabilities, South Korea's growing openness to nuclear acquisition represents a significant normative change. Beyond strong public support for indigenous nuclear weapons, influential political figures now openly advocate reconsidering South Korea's non-nuclear status. Former Foreign Minister Song Min-soon argued that South Korea should start reviewing the sovereign right to withdraw from the NPT. Taiwan presents another concerning case. Though officially committed to peaceful nuclear development, Taiwan maintained a covert weapons program until U.S. pressure forced its abandonment in the 1980s. With China's increasingly aggressive posture and North Korea's nuclear deterrent success, security analysts worry that Taiwan might reconsider nuclear options despite the potential diplomatic fallout. This undermining of institutional norms carries cascading effects. U.S. intelligence assessments indicate 15 to 20 countries currently possess the technical capability to develop nuclear weapons quickly if they made the political decision. Nuclear acquisition often triggers regional chain reactions as neighboring states reassess their security requirements. Ambassador Robert Gallucci, who negotiated with North Korea in 1994, warned, "The single greatest danger of a nuclear North Korea is not that it would launch an unprovoked attack, but that it would trigger a regional cascade of proliferation that would destroy the global nonproliferation regime." Historical precedent supports this concern. India's 1974 nuclear test directly influenced Pakistan's program. China's nuclear development accelerated Soviet and American missile initiatives. The Middle East currently exists in precarious balance, with multiple technically capable states watching Iran's program with alarm. Yet there remains room for cautious optimism. The international response to North Korea has imposed genuine costs on the regime. North Korea's economy remains severely constrained, with per capita GDP estimates between 1/20th and 1/40th of South Korea's. This economic hardship could deter potential proliferators who lack North Korea's willingness to sacrifice development for nuclear status. The North Korean case also reveals the extraordinary technical challenges of nuclear development. Despite decades of effort, its arsenal remains relatively small and technically limited compared to established nuclear powers. Countries without North Korea's societal mobilization or willingness to endure extreme military isolation dimensions may conclude that the costs outweigh the benefits. Those technical limitations might be more advanced than most realize. Behind the regime's typical bluster and propaganda lies a nuclear capability that has progressed from crude test devices to what some experts now consider a genuine strategic arsenal, one that may be far more sophisticated than publicly acknowledged. Intelligence estimates regarding North Korea's nuclear arsenal vary significantly, reflecting the extraordinary challenges in gathering reliable information. Current assessments from a U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency suggest North Korea possesses between 20 to 60 nuclear warheads, while the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute provides a more conservative estimate of 30 to 40 devices. These disparities highlight a fundamental problem. No outside agency can precisely determine the size of North Korea's nuclear stockpile due to the regime's exceptional secrecy. This uncertainty extends beyond mere numbers to the technical composition of the arsenal. While early North Korean devices used primarily plutonium, Western intelligence agencies believe the regime has significantly expanded its uranium enrichment capabilities. Satellite imagery has identified multiple clandestine enrichment facilities beyond the known complex at Yongbyon, suggesting a production capacity far greater than previously recognized. These facilities continue operating despite international monitoring efforts, steadily increasing the country's weapons-grade material stockpile. What makes assessment particularly challenging is the contrast between Western intelligence evaluations and North Korea's own claims. The regime routinely announces technological breakthroughs that experts initially dismiss as propaganda, only to later demonstrate capabilities that surprise the international community. This pattern played out dramatically with North Korea's ICBM program, which progressed from seemingly implausible boasts to demonstrated capabilities within a time frame that caught many analysts off guard. This uncertainty creates a significant strategic dilemma for military planners. Without precise information about warhead designs, material composition, or manufacturing techniques, defense systems must be designed against worst-case assumptions rather than confirmed capabilities. This asymmetric information advantage has become a deliberate element of North Korea's deterrence strategy, creating ambiguity that complicates adversaries' calculations. North Korea's missile development program has undergone remarkable evolution in recent years. The regime now possesses a multi-tiered missile architecture spanning tactical, regional, and intercontinental ranges. Like an automotive company that evolved from producing basic sedans to high-performance sports cars, North Korea has transformed from rudimentary Scud derivatives to sophisticated systems featuring accuracy within 10 meters and evasive terminal phase maneuvers specifically designed to defeat advanced missile defenses. Critical technological advances include the transition from liquid fuel systems to solid fuel designs. This shift provides significant tactical advantages: faster deployment, smaller launch crews, and extended ready-to-launch status. The successful test of solid fuel motors represents a significant leap forward in North Korea's ability to conduct surprise launches with minimal warning time. Warhead miniaturization has shown similar progress. After the 2017 thermonuclear test, seismic data suggested a yield consistent with an advanced two-stage device rather than a simple fission bomb. While experts remain skeptical about North Korea's mastery of reliable atmospheric reentry vehicles, the regime has displayed credible designs featuring heat shields and internal structures consistent with modern warhead technology. Submarine-launched ballistic missile development adds another dimension to these capabilities. The regime has conducted multiple tests of the Puksuksong family of solid-fuel SLBMs, and satellite imagery has identified construction of a new ballistic missile submarine significantly larger than previous experimental platforms. Though limited by a small fleet of conventional submarines, this pursuit demonstrates sophisticated understanding of strategic deterrence principles, specifically the importance of a secure second strike capability that could survive a preemptive attack. North Korea's conventional capabilities make its nuclear threat particularly challenging. The regime maintains approximately 13,000 artillery pieces along the DMZ, many in hardened positions pre-targeted on Seoul. Military analysts estimate these systems could deliver over 10,000 rounds in the first hour of conflict, potentially causing hundreds of thousands of casualties before nuclear weapons enter the equation. This conventional threat effectively uses Seoul as a human shield against preemptive strikes, creating a dangerous escalation. Latter, where even limited military actions risk catastrophic retaliation. Intelligence gathering about North Korea's nuclear program faces extraordinary challenges. The country maintains extreme isolation with virtually no free press, a closed national intranet, and severe punishment for unauthorized foreign communication. Key nuclear facilities are constructed underground with multiple security perimeters and extensive camouflage measures that limit satellite intelligence. Human intelligence operations face nearly insurmountable obstacles in a society where constant surveillance and multi-generational punishment create an environment uniquely resistant to penetration. The resulting intelligence picture relies primarily on satellite imagery, propaganda analysis, seismic data, and occasional high-level defectors. This limited visibility has led to significant intelligence surprises, from uranium enrichment revelations in 2010 to the unexpected pace of ICBM development in 2017. Despite these considerable challenges, growing consensus suggests North Korea has achieved a credible nuclear deterrent that fundamentally alters military calculations. While its arsenal remains small compared to established nuclear powers, Russia and the United States maintain approximately 4,000 operational warheads each. While China possesses about 350, North Korea's capabilities are sufficiently robust to inflict unacceptable damage on adversaries. This transformation has reshaped Northeast Asia's strategic landscape, constraining military options and granting the regime newfound security. The evolutionary path of North Korea's nuclear program offers important insights about its future trajectory. What was once dismissed as a primitive program incapable of producing functional weapons has steadily advanced despite isolation, sanctions, and technical challenges. While significant hurdles remain, particularly in reliable ICBM reentry vehicles and miniaturization of thermonuclear designs, the program's demonstrated resilience suggests these obstacles will eventually be overcome barring dramatic intervention. Failed diplomatic approaches. Despite decades of international pressure, sanctions, and negotiations, North Korea's nuclear program has only accelerated, revealing a stark contradiction at the heart of diplomatic efforts. What if the very negotiations meant to dismantle North Korea's nuclear ambitions actually provided the perfect cover for their achievement? The diplomatic history with North Korea reveals a pattern so consistent it borders on ritual. The 1994 agreed framework represented the first major diplomatic breakthrough, with North Korea committing to freeze plutonium production in exchange for light water reactors and energy assistance. Yet even as U.S. negotiators celebrated this achievement, satellite imagery showed continued construction at suspected nuclear sites. When confronted about a covert uranium enrichment program in 2002, North Korean officials didn't deny it. They simply insisted on their right to possess it. This fundamental disconnect has plagued every subsequent negotiation. The Bush administration's approach from 2001 to 2008 oscillated between confrontation and engagement, with the president famously including North Korea in his axis of evil, before later authorizing direct negotiations. The six-party talks established in 2003 involving China, Japan, Russia, South Korea, and the United States appeared promising. After 3 years of negotiations, North Korea agreed to abandon all nuclear weapons and existing nuclear programs in September 2005. Less than a year later, they conducted their first nuclear test. The Obama administration's strategic patience policy combined dialogue with sanctions pressure, yet failed to prevent North Korea from conducting 4 nuclear tests between 2009 and 2016. The Trump administration's leader-to-leader diplomacy generated initial optimism. The Singapore summit in June 2018 produced commitments to work toward complete denuclearization, but negotiations collapsed at Hanoi when North Korea demanded comprehensive sanctions relief before taking substantive denuclearization steps. These diplomatic failures stem from several critical factors. The term denuclearization contains a fundamental ambiguity. For American negotiators, it means North Korea's unilateral nuclear disarmament. For North Korean officials, it refers to a mutual process where American security guarantees precede any North Korean concessions. Victor Cha, former director for Asian Affairs at the National Security Council, noted, "The North Koreans have never actually promised to unilaterally disarm. They've always talked about denuclearization in the context of the United States also denuclearizing." The concessions offered to North Korea have consistently underestimated the regime's valuation of its nuclear program. Economic incentives and security assurances have never matched the existential security the regime derives from nuclear weapons. "I sat across from their negotiators for hundreds of hours," recalled a former State Department official who requested anonymity. The difference in our positions wasn't just about technical details. We were living in completely different realities about what was possible. Regional powers' divided priorities have undermined diplomatic efforts. China prioritizes stability over denuclearization, fearing regime collapse could trigger refugee flows across its border. Russia values North Korea as a strategic counterweight to U.S. influence. These divergent interests have allowed North Korea to exploit divisions in the international coalition. Verification challenges have plagued diplomatic initiatives. North Korea's network of hidden facilities, many buried underground or disguised as civilian installations, makes comprehensive monitoring nearly impossible. During previous agreements, North Korea restricted inspector access and engaged in deception, Former IAEA Inspector Ali Heinonen remarked, North Korea has consistently demonstrated its ability to hide facilities from even the most rigorous inspection regimes. Without full transparency, verification becomes an exercise in futility. Both American and North Korean domestic politics have prevented sustained diplomatic engagement. The U.S. political system, with its transitions of power between parties, has produced policy whiplash. The Clinton administration's agreed framework was never fully implemented by a skeptical Republican Congress. Each subsequent administration essentially started from scratch, giving North Korea little incentive to make irreversible concessions to temporary negotiating partners. In North Korea, nuclear weapons have become central to the regime's legitimacy. State propaganda portrays them as the culmination of Kim Il-sung's Jewish self-reliance ideology. For Kim Jong-un, surrendering these weapons would undermine the foundation of his authority. As North Korea expert Ankit Panda explains, the nuclear program has become the centerpiece of regime propaganda and legitimacy. Dismantling it would require the regime to fundamentally reinvent its narrative. Evidence suggests North Korea has systematically used diplomatic processes to advance its nuclear program. During the 1994 agreed framework period, North Korea maintained a covert uranium enrichment program. During the six-party talks, it continued nuclear material production while negotiating. Even during the Singapore summit process, satellite imagery revealed ongoing activity at nuclear facilities. Each diplomatic initiative has provided North Korea with temporary sanctions relief or reduced pressure while its weapons program advanced. The record of failed negotiations has convinced many experts that North Korea never intended to denuclearize through diplomacy. Former State Department official Evans Revere concluded after analyzing North Korean statements, Pyongyang has no intention of denuclearizing. Full stop. Their strategy is to be accepted as a nuclear weapon state while extracting maximum concessions from the international community. This perspective explains why promising diplomatic initiatives have collapsed. North Korea engages in negotiations to achieve specific tactical objectives: sanctions relief, international legitimacy, or time to advance its programs, while maintaining its strategic commitment to nuclear weapons. William Perry, former U.S. Defense Secretary who negotiated with North Korea, reflected, they never saw their nuclear program as a bargaining chip to be traded away. They saw it as their ultimate insurance policy. Military intervention scenarios. When diplomatic channels fail, military options inevitably enter the conversation. But Pentagon's simulations of strikes against North Korea reveal why 5 successive U.S. administrations have ultimately backed away from the brink. The harsh reality is that there are no good military solutions to the North Korean nuclear problem, only varying degrees of catastrophic outcomes. Military planners categorize potential interventions against North Korea into 3 broad scenarios, each presenting progressively greater existential risks. The first and most limited option involves precision strikes against known nuclear facilities and missile launch sites. Operation Plan 5015, developed jointly by U.S. and South Korean forces, includes provisions for decapitation strikes targeting the Kim regime's leadership and command structures. These surgical operations aim to neutralize North Korea's nuclear capabilities while minimizing broader conflict. However, limited strikes face a critical obstacle: North Korea's extensive concealment measures. A 2018 Pentagon assessment concluded that the United States lacks reliable intelligence on the locations of up to 70% of North Korea's nuclear infrastructure. Many facilities are buried deep underground, beneath mountains with hundreds of meters of granite. Overhead, the Punggye-ri nuclear test site lies beneath Mount Mantap, with tunnels extending more than 2 kilometers horizontally into the mountain. Even the most advanced bunker-busting weapons in the U.S. arsenal, such as the massive ordnance penetrator, can penetrate only approximately 60 meters of reinforced concrete. Against deeper facilities, conventional weapons would prove ineffective, potentially creating pressure for tactical nuclear weapons, crossing a threshold unbroken since 1945. The second scenario escalates to a broader air campaign combined with special operations forces. This approach targets nuclear facilities alongside conventional military infrastructure, command networks, and air defenses. While potentially more effective at degrading nuclear capabilities, this scenario significantly increases the likelihood of full-scale war. A RAND Corporation study concluded that North Korea would interpret such a campaign as the prelude to regime change and respond with maximum force. Within hours of the first strikes, North Korea would likely activate its substantial retaliatory capabilities against South Korea and Japan, triggering widespread devastation. The third and most extreme scenario envisions a full-scale invasion to overthrow the regime and secure all nuclear materials. This operation would require hundreds of thousands of ground troops and result in the most catastrophic conflict since World War II. Former Deputy Commander of U.S. Forces Korea, Lieutenant General Juas, warned that the U.S. would need weeks to deploy sufficient forces, time during which North Korea could cause devastating damage. North Korea's response options present unacceptable risks regardless of the initial military action. The immediate threat is to Seoul. With approximately 13,000 artillery pieces along the DMZ, North Korea could unleash an urban firestorm, delivering thousands of rounds in the first hour of conflict. Simulations suggest casualties could reach 30,000 to 300,000 in the first 24 hours alone, creating a humanitarian crisis of staggering proportions. Beyond conventional weapons, North Korea maintains the world's third-largest chemical weapon stockpile, including nerve agents like VX and sarin that could cause mass casualties throughout the peninsula, amplifying the humanitarian catastrophe. The nuclear dimension presents the most terrifying aspect. Military experts believe the regime would face use it or lose it pressure during a major conflict. If North Korea detonated even a single low-yield nuclear device over a populated area, casualties could exceed 100,000, with long-term contamination rendering large areas uninhabitable. A generational tragedy. The economic impact would reverberate globally. South Korea, the world's 10th largest economy, produces 70% of the world's memory chips. A Congressional Research Service report estimated that a major Korean conflict could trigger a global economic contraction of 5 to 10% in the first year, a recession more severe than the 2008 financial crisis, affecting livelihoods worldwide. The technological challenges of neutralizing North Korea's nuclear capabilities compound these risks. Mobile missile launchers relocate within minutes, making them nearly impossible to target comprehensively. Solid fuel missiles require minimal preparation time, allowing launches even as military operations commence. Underground facilities connected by extensive tunnel networks provide redundancy that no air campaign could eliminate completely. China's potential response adds another dimension to this dangerous equation. Chinese officials have stated that if the United States strikes North Korea first, China would intervene to protect the regime. The 1961 Sino-North Korean Mutual Aid Treaty technically obliges China to defend North Korea against unprovoked aggression, though Beijing's interpretation remains deliberately ambiguous. Chinese military intervention could range from securing the border region to direct engagement with U.S. and South Korean forces, transforming a regional conflict into a superpower confrontation with nuclear dimensions. The ultimate nightmare scenario. Perhaps most alarming is the risk of nuclear material dispersal during conflict. North Korea's weapons-grade plutonium and highly enriched uranium could become vulnerable during regime collapse. Former Defense Secretary Mattis warned that securing these materials would require a massive ground operation under hostile conditions with uncertain knowledge of material locations. These catastrophic risks explain why successive U.S. administrations have ultimately backed away from military options. As former National Security Advisor McMaster acknowledged, when you actually evaluate the consequences, it becomes clear why this problem has defied solution for so long. Early warning signs of crisis would include unusual troop movements near the DMZ, evacuation of foreign nationals from South Korea, redeployment of U.S. strategic assets, or disruption of communication channels between Washington and Pyongyang. Perhaps most telling would be China's actions, as Beijing would likely receive advance warning of North Korean intentions and begin securing its borders. China's pivotal role. China's relationship with North Korea reveals a complex geopolitical balancing act that few outside observers fully appreciate. While Beijing publicly condemns Pyongyang's nuclear program, the reality beneath official statements tells a different story. China provides North Korea with approximately 90% of its imported petroleum, 80% of its consumer goods, and roughly half of all food imports. This economic lifeline effectively keeps the Kim regime afloat despite international sanctions designed to pressure North Korea toward denuclearization. The economic backbone of this relationship is evident in the trade figures. By September 2023, bilateral trade had already surpassed $2 billion, with Chinese exports to North Korea increasing by 151% compared to the previous year. This followed a 2022 rebound to $1.78 billion, representing a 226% increase from pandemic-era lows. These figures represent a lifeline wrapped in barbed wire, sustaining North Korea while China simultaneously maintains public opposition to its nuclear ambitions. China's selective enforcement of UN sanctions reveals its calculated approach. When North Korea conducts nuclear tests, China typically supports UN Security Council condemnations. However, implementation often falls short. Satellite imagery has captured Chinese vessels transferring fuel to North Korean ships at sea. In 2018, U.S. reconnaissance aircraft documented at least 30 illegal ship-to-ship transfers in the East China Sea involving Chinese vessels. The Dandong-Sinuiju border corridor handles approximately 70% of all trade between the two countries. Despite sanctions, Chinese authorities often categorize restricted goods as humanitarian aid or use classification loopholes to maintain trade flows. A 2021 UN panel of experts report documented numerous instances where Chinese companies facilitated North Korean coal exports disguised as other countries' products, generating foreign currency for Pyongyang's nuclear program. Chinese President Xi Jinping's 2019 state visit to Pyongyang, the first by a Chinese leader in 14 years, demonstrated Beijing's strategic priorities. She pledged to actively contribute to regional peace while promising economic assistance, exemplifying China's dual approach, advocating for stability while ensuring North Korea's economic survival. China's approach stems from fundamental strategic interests beyond nuclear concerns. Beijing views North Korea as an essential buffer state between China and U.S.-allied South Korea. The prospect of a unified, democratic Korea on China's border represents a strategic nightmare for Chinese leaders. As former Chinese Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi reportedly told South Korean counterparts in 2017, North Korea is China's border. It is not necessarily your country. This buffer state strategy explains China's opposition to regime change in Pyongyang. During the 2017 fire and fury tensions between the U.S. and North Korea, China increased military deployments along its 880-mile border with North Korea. These deployments included additional border guards, radiation monitoring equipment, and refugee processing facilities, preparations designed to contain potential instability rather than pressure North Korea. China's refugee concerns are substantial. Internal Chinese government assessments estimate that regime collapse could trigger a refugee flow of 1 to 2 million North Koreans into China's already economically challenged northeastern provinces. One contingency plan, detailed in leaked documents, outlines refugee camps capable of holding up to 300,000 people in Jilin province alone, demonstrating China's focus on containing fallout rather than fostering change. Beyond refugee concerns, China fears the strategic consequences of North Korean collapse. If the Kim regime fell, U.S. forces could potentially advance to the Chinese border, eliminating the strategic buffer that North Korea provides. Chinese strategists consistently identify this scenario as unacceptable to Beijing's core interests. This explains China's sabotage of international efforts that might threaten Pyongyang's stability. In 2017, when the U.S. pushed for complete oil embargoes, China watered down sanctions to maintain resource flows. Similarly, Chinese companies continue providing dual-use technologies that support North Korea's civilian economy while indirectly aiding its weapons programs. When China does apply pressure, it calibrates actions to signal disapproval without risking collapse. Following North Korea's 2017 nuclear test, China temporarily suspended coal imports and limited banking transactions, measures expressing displeasure while preserving Kim's power. These restrictions were relaxed once. Tensions decreased, demonstrating China's preference for symbolic rather than substantive pressure. The U.S.-China strategic competition complicates cooperation on North Korea. Beijing views American policies toward North Korea through the lens of containment efforts against China. Each U.S. action, whether deploying THAAD missile defense systems in South Korea or conducting joint military exercises, is interpreted as part of a strategy to constrain Chinese influence. This creates a fundamental misalignment. While the U.S. prioritizes denuclearization, China prioritizes stability and preserving its strategic buffer. As Zhao Tong, a nuclear policy expert, observed, China fears North Korean nuclear weapons, but fears regime collapse even more. This divergence explains why coordinated pressure on Pyongyang has repeatedly failed. The Xi-Kim relationship reflects these calculations. After years of coldness following Kim's 2011 ascension, she has hosted Kim 5 times since 2018. These meetings emphasize traditional friendship while avoiding public criticism of North Korea's nuclear program. During Kim's 2019 Beijing visit, she praised their profound friendship written in blood, while making only vague references to denuclearization. China's economic leverage over North Korea remains deliberately underutilized. A complete Chinese embargo could collapse North Korea's economy within months. Yet Beijing maintains sufficient support to ensure regime survival, while occasionally tightening restrictions to signal displeasure with provocative actions. With China providing economic oxygen, the Kim regime weathers sanctions while continuing nuclear development, a pattern that explains North Korea's technological game changers. Beyond China's economic lifeline lies a technological revolution transforming North Korea from nuclear nuisance to existential threat. While the world has focused on missile tests and warhead yields, Pyongyang has quietly built a sophisticated cyber army that operates from the shadows of a nation where most citizens lack reliable electricity. North Korea's Bureau 121, the regime's elite hacking unit, employs approximately 6,000 cyber operators working from locations inside North Korea and in countries like China, Russia, and Southeast Asia. Like a stealthy virus infiltrating global networks, these digital soldiers execute sophisticated cyber operations targeting financial institutions, cryptocurrency exchanges, and defense contractors. The 2016 Bangladesh bank heist showcases their capabilities. Hackers attempted to steal $951 million through the SWIFT banking network, successfully transferring $81 million before detection. The FBI attributed this attack to North Korean operatives. The Lazarus Group, North Korea's premier hacking collective, evolved from conducting disruptive attacks to executing precision financial crimes. Their WannaCry ransomware infected over 300,000 computers across 150 countries in 2017. A 2019 United Nations report estimated that North Korea generated approximately $2 billion through these digital heists, funds flowing directly into weapons programs that would otherwise be starved by sanctions. North Korea's cyber program is a perfect example of asymmetric capability, explains Jenny June, a cybersecurity researcher at Columbia University. For a relatively small investment, they've created an operation that both generates revenue and provides intelligence collection capabilities that would normally require far more resources. This digital battlefield represents North Korea's most successful sanctions evasion strategy. While conventional trade remains restricted, cryptocurrency theft creates a parallel financial system beyond international control. In 2022 alone, North Korean hackers stole an estimated $1.7 billion in cryptocurrency, equivalent to roughly 10% of North Korea's entire economy. These stolen funds directly accelerate North Korea's most concerning technological advancement, the transition to solid-fuel missile systems. Unlike liquid fuel rockets that require hours of visible preparation before launch, solid fuel missiles can be deployed with minimal warning. The Puksuksong 4 and Puksuksong 5 submarine-launched ballistic missiles demonstrated this technology, which North Korea has now transferred to land-based systems. In September 2021, North Korea tested a new solid propellant missile capable of hypersonic glide. This system reached Mach 10 speeds while performing maneuvers specifically designed to defeat American and Allied missile defense systems. According to missile expert Ankit Panda, these are fundamental transformations in North Korea's strike capabilities that drastically reduce warning time for defenders. The strategic implications are profound. Early warning satellites might detect a North Korean missile launch just 30 to 45 seconds after ignition, compared to the hours of preparation visible with liquid fuel systems. This compressed timeline eliminates crucial decision-making windows for neighboring countries and the United States, potentially forcing preemptive strategies that increase crisis instability. Even more concerning is North Korea's development of tactical nuclear weapons designed specifically for battlefield use. In January 2022, North Korea tested tactical guided missiles capable of carrying lower-yield nuclear warheads. These weapons, with yields of 5 to 20 kilotons, are designed for battlefield use against military targets, potentially lowering the threshold for nuclear first use. Dr. Siegfried Hecker, former director of Los Alamos National Laboratory, who has visited North Korean nuclear facilities, notes, the combination of tactical weapons with solid fuel delivery systems creates an entirely different strategic problem. These aren't weapons of last resort. They're designed as usable military options. North Korea's pursuit of multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle MIRV technology represents another technological leap with destabilizing effects. Putting multiple warheads on a single missile complicates interception efforts exponentially. Intelligence assessments suggest significant progress toward this capability, potentially overwhelming existing missile defense systems. The missile defense equation itself continues to evolve. The United States has invested billions in systems like THAAD and Aegis sea-based interceptors. However, North Korea's development of sophisticated countermeasures, including decoys, chaff, and maneuvering warheads, threatens to outpace these defensive technologies. Dr. Laura Grego, a physicist specializing in missile defense, explains that missile defense systems operate at the very edge of physics and engineering limitations. A determined adversary with relatively simple countermeasures can often defeat even sophisticated interceptors. Perhaps most worrying is North Korea's emerging interest in artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. In 2022, North Korean researchers published papers on machine learning algorithms that could potentially enhance missile guidance systems and improve nuclear weapon designs. Even basic AI applications could significantly enhance targeting precision and reduce the need for human decision-making in crisis situations. The introduction of AI into nuclear command and control creates unprecedented risks. Professor James Johnson warns that AI-augmented early warning systems could introduce new forms of instability because machines might detect false positives that humans would normally filter out, potentially triggering escalation in crisis situations. These technological advances intersect with North Korea's unique political system in particularly dangerous ways. Nuclear authority appears concentrated almost exclusively with Kim Jong-un. This centralization, combined with compressed decision timelines created by new technologies, heightens the risk of miscalculation during crises. The cybersphere presents additional novel risks. North Korean hackers have demonstrated both the capability and willingness to target critical infrastructure. The prospect of cyber attacks against early warning systems or nuclear command and control infrastructure introduces unprecedented escalation risks, particularly as these systems become increasingly networked. Most concerning is how these technological developments intersect with North Korea's isolation from international norms. Nuclear powers during the Cold War developed shared understandings about crisis management through decades of dialogue. North Korea operates outside these established frameworks, potentially misunderstanding how its technological developments might be perceived by adversaries. Future scenarios and paths forward. North Korea's isolation from global norms doesn't just complicate the problem. It forces us to redefine what a solution even means. As technological advancement accelerates in Pyongyang's weapons programs, the window for conventional diplomatic approaches is rapidly closing, leaving us with choices that challenge long-held assumptions about nuclear security. The future of the North Korean nuclear crisis presents three distinct pathways. First, military conflict would bring humanitarian and economic devastation on an unacceptable scale. Second, arms control compromise offers a middle path of containment and risk reduction. Third, accepting North Korea's nuclear status could trigger regional proliferation while establishing a tense but stable status quo. Each pathway carries profound implications for global security. The traditional approach of strategic patience has demonstrably failed. Ambassador Robert Gallucci, who negotiated the 1994 agreed framework, acknowledges, "We've been hoping economic pressure would change their calculus for 3 decades. The evidence suggests we need a different approach." Strategic patience merely provides time for North Korea to enhance its capabilities while populations suffer under sanctions. Similarly, aggressive confrontation through military posturing or maximalist diplomatic demands has proven ineffective. The Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign initially brought North Korea to the negotiating table, but ultimately failed when the administration insisted on complete denuclearization as a precondition for sanctions relief. Former Defense Secretary William Perry argues, "We should recognize what's achievable versus what's desirable." North Korea will not volunteer to eliminate the nuclear arsenal it views as its survival insurance. A more realistic goal is constraining that arsenal and reducing the risk it presents. This recognition has led many experts to advocate shifting from denuclearization to arms control. Stanford University's Siegfried Hecker, who has visited North Korean nuclear facilities multiple times, proposes a halt, rollback, eliminate framework. First, stop the program from advancing further. Then gradually roll it back through verifiable agreements. Only then can we realistically discuss elimination, Hecker explains. Evidence suggests North Korea might accept limitations on its program while refusing complete denuclearization. During the 2018 to 2019 diplomatic process, North Korean officials signaled potential willingness to dismantle the Yongbyon nuclear complex for partial sanctions relief. Though negotiations collapsed over disagreements about sanctions removal, this indicated possible flexibility on constraints. Former CIA analyst Sumi Terry notes, Kim Jong-un understands that an unconstrained arms race isn't in his interest either. The more North Korea advances its capabilities, the more the United States strengthens regional alliances and deployments, creating a security dilemma that ultimately makes North Korea less secure. Several concrete arms control measures could form the basis of interim agreements. A verifiable freeze on nuclear and missile testing to prevent technological advancement, caps on fissile material production to limit arsenal expansion, and restrictions on destabilizing missile technologies like solid fuel systems, while allowing North Korea to maintain basic deterrence. A comprehensive approach must address both security and economic dimensions simultaneously. North Korea's fundamental security anxiety stems from perceived American hostility and fear of regime change, while its economic isolation remains a critical pressure point. Moon Chung-in, former special advisor to South Korea's president, argues, "We need to acknowledge North Korea's security concerns as legitimate, even if we reject their methods of addressing them." A framework combining a formal peace treaty, diplomatic normalization, and military confidence-building measures could alter their risk calculations. Economic engagement, specifically structured with graduated incentives tied to verifiable nuclear constraints, could provide leverage while satisfying North Korea's desire for integration. Rather than all-or-nothing sanctions approaches, sector-specific relief could be exchanged for specific weapons limitations, with mechanisms to reimpose sanctions if agreements are violated. Chinese and Russian participation would remain essential for implementation. Perhaps most urgently needed are crisis communication mechanisms to prevent miscalculation. Unlike other nuclear relationships, North Korea and the United States lack established channels for emergency communication. A former Pentagon official warns, the most likely path to nuclear use isn't deliberate aggression, but miscalculation during crisis. When missiles are flying over Japan and naval vessels are operating in close proximity, the margin for error becomes dangerously thin. Creating multiple communication channels, including leader hotlines, military deconfliction mechanisms, and diplomatic back channels, would provide essential guardrails during periods of tension, functioning regardless of broader relations. What emerges is that a multilateral, incremental approach focused on risk reduction offers the most promising path forward. Former U.S. negotiator Joel Witt characterizes this reality. The choice isn't between a nuclear-free North Korea and a nuclear-armed North Korea. It's between an unconstrained North Korean nuclear program and one subject to negotiated limits that reduce the risk of crisis, conflict, and nuclear use. Among the 5 regions examined in this analysis, the North Korean nuclear flashpoint presents perhaps the most immediate danger. North Korea combines technological immaturity with political isolation and economic desperation, creating unique escalation risks. Picture the Korean Peninsula as a frozen lake in spring, where the ice has begun to crack. Beneath lies the abyss of catastrophic conflict. Above stands the possibility of a new security architecture. Each step forward must be carefully placed. Too much pressure in the wrong spot risks plunging the region into the depths, while refusing to move forward means remaining trapped on increasingly unstable ground. The path to safety isn't returning to the shore we left, but carefully navigating toward the distant bank. A journey requiring patience, strategic foresight, and the courage to take measured risks toward a more stable future. After examining the 5 global nuclear flashpoints, the North Korean crisis stands as uniquely dangerous, a desperate regime with apocalyptic weaponry governed by personalized authority. This combination creates unprecedented instability within the international system. Traditional approaches have failed. Maximum pressure and strategic patience yielded no meaningful progress. The international community must pivot toward pragmatic solutions, establishing crisis communication channels, pursuing limited arms control agreements, and creating graduated economic incentives. What happens on the Korean Peninsula will echo globally. Will we create a template for defusing nuclear standoffs or accept a more dangerous world? The answer depends on our willingness to embrace uncomfortable compromises now, before it's too late.